I'm Jim Matheson, Democrat.
The value of Jim Matheson was not that he was a Democrat or a Republican. It was that he was this voice for a constituency that wasn't represented by either traditional party.
Ever since I started running for this job years ago, what I do every day is I listen to people. You know, and people in politics aren't doing that enough.
Jim's whole motive is to do the right thing. Do the right thing for the people of Utah. You do that, you're going to get reelected. Doesn't matter what label you have.
The folks who put politics and party above doing what is right aren't leaders, they are extremists.
Most often the right was mad at the congressman. Very often the left was mad at the congressman.
And I get it. You're angry about some of my votes.
The pressure put on him to change his vote on many key votes must have been enormous. Can you imagine?
As part of the campaign, I went around to all the mayors in the 4th Congressional District, and they knew Jim very well. He was the practical nuts and bolts guy who helped those mayors get things done. He's a very sophisticated consumer of political information.
We're a republic. We're not supposed to be a parliamentary system, we're a representative system. Get to know your constituents. You'd be surprised how much it makes you a better member of Congress.
I grew up across the street from Jim, and I've known him almost my entire life. Jim was always very athletic, very bright, and he was always very creative too. I remember at one point he wanted to create a record for the Guinness Book of World Records, and he tried to think of something that was very strategic, that wasn't expensive, that could be done easily, and he could get a lot of people involved, which was a huge game of musical chairs with, I don't know, 17 or 1,800 people, I think.
There was always an activity. We had to organize our own activities. It was the old phone tree, and Jim was a master at working the phone tree. There wasn't a Republican or a Democrat. It was just, could you play when you could play? He always had the biggest palms of anyone in the neighborhood, and he would draw out the football play on his hand. Whenever I see him talking with his hands up like this, I say, there's Jim making another play.
He mowed our lawn along with his older brother, and of course my dad wasn't allowed to pay him until his father came by and inspected, because the governor didn't, well, he wasn't the governor then, Scott Sr. didn't want us to pay his sons unless they did a great job.
According to the Washington Post, Representative Jim Matheson was the only member of Utah's delegation to donate his pay. The Democratic congressman donated his entire pay for the length of the shutdown.
I was always proud of Jim. I love the fact that when he announced he was running the first time, he chose to do it from in front of the home where he'd grown up, because it exemplified what was important to him, was his home base and the people who lived here.
I believe there is honor in public service, and I am hopeful about the future. And that means being thoughtful about every issue and having an open discussion.
Working with Congressman Matheson was always a great pleasure. I never brought up the fact that he disagreed with me on some of the national issues, and he never brought up the fact either. We just put that aside. He was a Democrat, I was a Republican. But for the moment, as we focused on an issue, we were fellow Utahns.
When I first got to know him, I was supporting another person, and I wore a shirt that said, "Friends don't let friends vote Democratic." But we became very close friends, and I says, you know, Jim, in this case, I support you 100% in what you're doing because of the things you do. It's how you act and what you do for your people.
You know, I heard a lot from his constituents. They would often talk about Jim's work on the downwinder issue and how important that was to them.
In the 50s and 60s, the U.S. government conducted nuclear bomb tests at a Nevada test site. The radioactive fallout blew downwind, covering southern Utah. Those in its way suffered disease, cancer, and even death.
At first, the U.S. government said the tests and the radioactive fallout were safe. But then came the unusually high number of cancers, thyroid problems, and eventually deaths.
We now know the real story. We know that the government lied.
Let me tell you what that meant to these families. My very best friend, her mother died from cancer at a very young age, 57 years old, from an unexplained tumor. Her family is a downwinder family. Several members of her family received that $50,000 that Congressman Matheson fought to increase. This was not an intangible support for these people. In the case of my best friend's father, he carried a guilt for having moved his family to southern Utah to work because he felt it was his personal decision that led to his wife's developing that cancer and dying. When he saw Congressman Matheson fighting the government to own up and give more to these families, he at least felt some sharing of the responsibility on the part of government.
My actions are guided by our shared values and by the love we have for our families and for our special state. Let's continue to work together because together we win. Thank you very much.
People will never understand how good Jim Matheson was.
He is someone who cares about his state, who does his homework, who has a great work ethic.
Basically, Jim is just a good guy. He wants to do the right thing.
He was a problem solver who never moved from his desire to get the problem solved.
He was able to go across the aisle, work with somebody else.
That's a tough act, I'll tell you. That's a fine line to walk right there.
Congressman Matheson voted the way he believed the people of Utah wanted him to vote.
It's been my privilege to serve you in Congress. My promise from the first day on the job has been to put Utah first, ahead of politics, party, or partisanship. I want the same thing for my family that you want for yours. A safe, healthy, and prosperous community with the opportunity for all to succeed. That is why I do this job.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to be a part of this amazing thing.
Congratulations, Congressman Matheson.
Jim, if you're listening, I want you to run for Senate.
Really? A Lifetime Achievement Award? Let's go organize a football game.
Well done, thou good and faithful. Best wishes on your future without any kind of endorsement implied.